Hello and welcome to Story Radio, the podcast for readers, writers and lovers of literature everywhere. Today we're talking to Daisy Goodwin. Daisy is the author of the New York Times best-selling novels The American Heiress and The Fortune Hunter. She is the screenwriter and executive producer of the PBS masterpiece drama Victoria, and she's also the author of Diva, her most recent novel about Maria Callas, which we're talking about today. Hi Daisy and welcome to Story Radio.
Hi Tabs.
I found this an absorbing read and I found myself drawn into the world of Callas and the wealthy people around her. I liked particularly the fragility of both of the main characters and the price they pay in their struggle for their acceptance. Diva is often used in a derogatory way these days. Could you talk about how you interpret it in the context of Callas?
Part of my purpose in writing this book was to reclaim the word diva because, as you say, it's today used in a rather derogatory way, but actually that seems to me completely wrong. You know, a diva, which is the kind of way of describing a great opera singer, it means goddess. And, you know, people like Callas with their amazing voices, they are goddesses. And just because they are perfectionists or they want things to be absolutely right doesn't mean that they are any less goddesses. So I suppose I'm trying to say that a diva should be a word that we own with pride rather than saying, as a way of sort of writing off women who want only blue-coloured Smarties in their dressing rooms. I felt very strongly about this, and I feel that it's a kind of a way of putting down very talented women. Instead of saying, diva with sincerity, you say diva meaning, yes, she's good, but she's also really demanding. And one of the things that I love about Callas is she was demanding, but she knew that she had to be in order to be the great singer that she was. And there's a great quote she makes about, I'm as only difficult as I need to be to achieve perfection. And, if Steve Jobs had said that, that would be on a t-shirt. But because it's a woman saying it, they go, oh, she's a diva. And I think that's gendered, and I think that we have to accept that women can be powerful, demanding and brilliant just as men are, and they can be as contradictory or as demanding as the men, but that doesn't mean they're any less brilliant.
Do you think that the fragility and the time-limited quality is part of the essence of, or a diva's
Yes,
being?
I think that's a very good point. I think that, a diva like Callas, as she knows that her voice is not going to last forever. She's like an athlete or anybody who's limited by their physical. There's a physical limit to how long she can go on, and you can pick up a violin when you're 85, but your voice does not stay with you in the same shape forever. And voices kind of grow into full maturity probably about the age of 30, and now singers are given very careful sort of gradations about when they can sing what when, so that they preserve their voices as long as possible. But it wasn't the same in Callas's day. So, she was so brilliant so early, and so she sang everything because she could, and that meant that her voice went much earlier than it should have done. So I think what your question is getting at, and I think it's absolutely right, she was a woman in a hurry, so she didn't have time to sort of mess around. She wanted it to be perfect always, and she was famous for being there, first person at rehearsals, last person to leave. She used to drive the other singers mad because at her dress rehearsals she would insist on doing it in full voice, and most singers kind of do it sort of slightly at half voice so that they've got some petrol left in the tank for the opening night. But when Maria did it, she did it wholeheartedly.
And it's not a word that's ever used to describe men, is it? It's
No.
entirely gendered.
Occasionally gay men, but that's about as far as it goes.
Yeah. So this it's a novel which gives you the freedom to go so much closer to your subject than a biography would. Did you always intend to write a novel, or did you consider writing a biography?
For me, it was always going to be fiction. I think because, there are about 100 non-fiction books already written about Maria Callas, and I've read quite a few of them, and it seemed to me that there was nothing I could contribute on that score. However, I knew that what there wasn't in any of these books was a real understanding of what it's like to be in the mind of, a female genius. And I didn't feel that any of the books, which either would talk about her voice or about her sort of private life, but none of them really sort of got into the sense of what it is to be at that pinnacle of greatness and the choices you have to make as a result. And so that's what I wanted to do. I decided to write a novel, although it is very strictly based on fact. I want to write a novel where the reader sees the world through Maria's eyes.
Did you define a set of rules at the outset of what you were going to allow yourself in terms of invention?
I've written a lot of historical fiction now, and I've read history at university, so I'm quite respectful of facts, and so I would never, make Maria do something that she couldn't possibly have done. But what I do is, when there are situations we don't know what people say to each other, I embellish based on my quite detailed understanding of who the characters are. In this novel, I slightly rearrange some of the chronology, but not in a way that I think really impinges on the sense of who Maria is, on its truthfulness. I would say that all my books are probably emotionally true to their subjects, and this one especially. And I suppose what are the rules? Well, one of my very, very small rules is that when I was writing about Victoria, nobody could ever say, oh, that's okay, because obviously nobody said that until the 20th century. So that was kind of an easy one. And with Maria, I had to just be mindful of the fact that there are lots of colloquialisms we use now that they would never have used in the 1950s and 60s. So language was something I was aware of, and I didn't invent any characters. Everybody in the book is real, but I may have kind of fleshed them out more than I knew, as it were, than I had actual verified facts for. But it's all very, it's as close to the truth as I can make it.
Yeah, she seems very powerful at first, but she knows her voice is going to fail, and she kind of seeks approval from people who don't give it to her, particularly Onassis. And could you talk a little bit more about the fragility of her character, which I think is the key?
Well, the thing I find so interesting about Maria is that actually, she, the sort of the most important thing in her life was that she was born to a mother who did not love her. So she was the second. She was the third child. The son immediately before her had died, and her mother, Liza, had very much wanted another boy. She got on a boat and gone from Athens to America with her family. They were emigrating to America, pregnant, and so Maria was born in New York. And when she was born, so the story goes, Liza sort of turned her face away and said, I don't want to see her, because she was so fixated on having a boy to replace the one she'd lost. And I think that set the tone for Maria's upbringing. So she was always fighting for attention. And she had an older sister called Jackie, who was kind of blonde and petite and beautiful. And, I think that the mother saw herself reflected in Jackie, and, this kind of large, rather ungainly child with black hair and huge feet was not the child, she could sympathise with, until she hears Maria sing. And the famous story is that Liza is coming back from the grocery store, and she looks up and she sees this crowd gathered on the pavement outside her apartment building, and she thinks, oh, what can be going on? And what's going on is that Maria is standing on the balcony. She's 7 or 8 years old, and she's singing Danny Boy at the top of her voice, and this crowd stop enraptured by this tiny child singing so loudly and so beautifully. And at that point, I think Liza, who, like so many stage mothers, is a sort of failed performer, thinks, aha, this is my chance to make my mark on the world through my daughter's talent. But I think the real problem is that she loves Maria's singing, but does she love Maria? I don't think so. And I think that became the kind of, I suppose, the curse of a performer like Maria, which is that when she sings, she has to sing to be loved. And that makes it incredibly difficult for her when her voice begins to go, because then she's thinking, well, without my voice, who am I? I'm nothing. And that is, I suppose, the kind of the heart of the book, the fragility. And that's the reason why she's so vulnerable to Onassis, because for the first time in her life she meets a man who's completely uninterested in music and appears to love her, Maria, the woman, not Maria, the greatest singer of all time. So that's the fatal flaw in Maria. And so it means that she's incredibly hardworking, and she goes out there and she sings because she needs that love from the audience. But it also means that when that ability goes, I think her reason for living goes with it.
Mm. Onassis is a kind of strange character, isn't he? He's kind of faithless, controlling. As you said, he doesn't like opera. And it's a slightly curious bit of his seduction routine where he kind of cites Plato's Symposium, which has this kind of idea of men and women being part of an opposite pair. I assume that's your invention rather than any kind of a...
No, I think that was something I read.
He used that.
Not only did he use this quote from Plato, but he also had this habit of creating bracelets for women he intended to sleep with their names on them, picked out in diamonds, and this quote. So when Maria is given one, she thinks, this is it. This is the great love story she's been waiting for her whole life. And when she later in the story realises that he's given exactly the same bracelet to somebody else, she's devastated.
That's such a telling detail, isn't it? The fact that he's just sort of doesn't have even the imagination to make a new sort of type of bracelets for each new lady. That's so true.
I did wonder whether he thought he actually really believed she was the one at first, and then he kind of drifts away, or whether he always knows it's all kind of just part of a kind of a seduction plan, and he knows he's going to be moving on.
I think there's a bit of both. I think that actually the thing about Onassis and Maria, they were very well matched in lots of ways, because in the world that they inhabited of sort of, socialites and aristocrats and, film stars and whatever, they were kind of unique because they were Greek, so they both spoke this language that nobody else could speak or understand. Secondly, they were both self-made, so when you're surrounded by people who come from money, it's a great bonding thing to be with somebody else who knows that you didn't always have money and that you've had to earn every penny of it. So that, I think, connected them in a way that he wasn't, say, connected to Lee Radziwill or Jackie Bouvier, Jackie Kennedy, because, they'd always been rich. And Maria understood all of that. Plus, I think they were genuinely sexually attracted to each other, which I don't think was the case with some of the other women he was with. But I think his fatal flaw was that he always wanted the new, as his wife says at one point, the new and shiniest thing. And so, he's always wanting the thing that he can't have. And he wants to win. So there's the widow of the murdered president, and he thinks, that's the next prize. And then, of course, when he gets it, it's a really Pyrrhic victory.
I like that moment where he cooks her the Greek breakfast, and you just know then that's it.
Yeah.
Because she's been starving. She seems to be pretty much starving herself the whole time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Elsa, the character of Elsa, who's a gossip columnist, she's obviously seems to be attracted to Callas, but she pushes her towards Onassis to trigger the relationship. Was that all from research, or was some of that from your imagination? How did that story come about?
So Elsa Maxwell's a real person, extraordinary figure. I mean, about 5 foot high, very ugly. She looked like the Duchess in Alice in Wonderland, hideous. But she was the absolute arbiter of all social life in the mid-20th century. I mean, you could not have a party unless Elsa was there or Elsa had organised it. I mean, it's the most extraordinary. She had this incredible power, social power, as the ultimate influencer. God knows how. Anyway, she and Maria meet because she's given Maria a really stinking review for her New York debut. And Maria's really annoyed. And so she sort of challenges her about it. And Elsa, once she actually meets Maria, Elsa's gay, falls madly in love with her. So it's a kind of extraordinary relationship because she's slavishly in love with Callas, but on the other hand, Onassis is actually paying her to effect an introduction, and so she sells her soul. And because the moment that Callas and Onassis meet, Elsa is out the window, she becomes de trop. And there's a scene that I wrote, but actually I cut out, which is where she's gone with Callas to Dallas in Texas, and where Elsa's organised a kind of concert that Callas is going to give in Dallas. But what she hasn't realised is it's the night of the kind of Beef Baron's Ball, which is like the most important event in the Dallas social calendar. So for the first time ever in her entire life, Callas is performing to an audience that is only half full. And of course she's furious, and she blames Elsa, and Elsa says, "Oh God, I'm so sorry, and really, I did it because I love you," and da 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 da. And Maria's horrified. I mean, all Maria's male friends are gay, but I think she hadn't quite understood what Elsa's feelings for her were, and she's not compassionate about it at all. And there is Elsa on her knees in front of her going, "Please forgive me." And Maria just says, "I spend my whole life on stage with men on their knees in front of me. You doing it really doesn't sway me at all. So, get up, you look ridiculous." So I think it's a doomed relationship, but it's very important to Callas at a certain point in her life because it takes her from a world where she's completely cloistered in a sort of schedule of performance and practice into slightly more opening of her sort of social life. She's going out, she's meeting movie stars, she's going to Venice for fun as opposed just to sing. So and Elsa is sort of instrumental in that.
She's becoming more like a modern day celebrity, kind of who's sort of an international. I guess they called them the jet set, didn't they, in those days?
The jet set, exactly.
So we jump around a bit in time at the start of the novel before settling down to a linear path, which brings to the fore the key drivers of the novel. Did you play around much with the structure?
Yeah, I did a bit. I mean, I always wanted to start with the idea that the moment when, in my view, Maria is giving this incredible performance of sang-froid, because it's the night when Jackie Kennedy is marrying Onassis on the island of Skorpios, which is an island that Ari and Maria had spent, 8 years on, and instead of marrying her, he's marrying this American woman who she detests. She's only found out that this is going to happen 2 weeks earlier, and so she is literally distraught. However, she knows that she's got to put on a good face, so she summons her incredible acting ability and goes out on the town with, her friend Zeffirelli, and they go to the theatre, and then they go to Maxine's, which is the restaurant where she and Onassis used to go all the time. They sit at the same table, and they have this kind of they put on this incredible show so that all the papers will have a picture of Callas, smiling and laughing and looking $1 million next to the picture of Onassis marrying Jackie. And I thought that was incredibly brave. And, it showed that there's something very gallant about Callas, that she won't be defeated by, the faithlessness of a man.
It's like when Princess Diana wore the famous revenge dress.
Yeah.
The best revenge is looking good.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Did your view of Callas change much over the course of writing the novel?
It's interesting. I suppose it did. I mean, I suppose the revelation to me was just how insecure she was, and also I realised as I took singing lessons in order to kind of really get into character, and when I realised how fragile your voice is, and how hard it is to kind of summon it if it's not there, I realised it gave me a real insight into the sort of terror that she must have felt a lot of the time, that the voice wasn't going to come. And it's a really interesting thing, because like a piano is always there, or a violin, you can pick it up and put it down, but your voice is, it should be there, you've trained it, it's all ready to go, and yet somebody blows smoke in your face, or the air conditioning's wrong, or you've got a bug, or whatever it is, and suddenly you can't sing. Or you're emotionally, something happens to you, and we've all had that feeling. You're so upset you can barely speak. Well, that's 100 times worse if you're a singer. I mean, imagine. So I think that really helped me understand how fragile she was at a very sort of basic level. I mean, there's her insecurity, her emotional insecurity, but she also has this kind of, she has to live with the terror of never knowing whether, as it were, her great superpower is going to fail her or not.
Terrifying sort of existential dread. Really.
Yes.
I can't imagine anything worse.
Yes.
During Callas's interview with Time magazine, the journalist ponders how everyone has a button somewhere, and the secret of a good interview is to find it. Is there anything that we should have asked you?
Oh God, that's quite a thing. I suppose, obviously I'm attracted to Callas because she's somebody who on the outside looks utterly confident and completely in command of everything she does, but on the inside is terrified. And I can't help but feel that sometimes. So that's something that kind of, creeps into my feelings about Callas. And I suppose the other thing is that, I think that when you're writing a book like this, you do, writers always say, oh, it's fiction, it's craft, it's the rest of it, but there's inevitably you become very invested in your character. And, there are moments when I think, is this Callas or is this me? Or have we become the same person or whatever? And it's hard to know. It's hard to know what I've supplied and what was already there, if you know what I mean. But I think that's one of the sort of the joys of writing, in a sense, that you can sort of really delve into a character. And I think I've noticed that when I was writing about Callas, I could feel myself trying on some of her, as it were, mannerisms for size. But
You weren't singing Danny Boy out in the street.
No. But and I didn't expect a standing ovation every night. But it becomes you get very sort of intertwined, as it were.
Well, I think that's kind of an interesting one for my next question, which is going to be, what is your next project? I guess it's quite hard to leave her behind, and and I wonder if you found something yet, or if you're still. I've got something
I'm writing at the moment, which is actually back to Queen Victoria, but it's Queen Victoria later. Albert's just died, and it's a very different Queen Victoria to the one. But yeah, I mean, she's very familiar. It's like putting on an old dress, but it's quite fun to write because she's, behaving quite badly. And yeah, I mean, I think that's the novel I'm going to end up finishing, I hope. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. I suddenly sort of I started to write it yesterday, and I thought, oh yeah, I mean, I've written a bit, but I got back into it, and I thought, oh yeah, this'll I can hang out with this woman for a few more 1,000 words rather.
And it wasn't all misery and gloom, was it? I mean, there were rumours about Queen Victoria after her widowhood.
Certainly, in my version of events, Queen Victoria gets very up close and personal with John Brown, her personal Highland servant. So. She finds that widowhood has its advantages.
Brilliant! Oh, thank you so much, Daisy. It's been fantastic to talk to you.
Lovely to talk to you both. Great questions.
And now Daisy's going to read to us from Diva.
Yeah, I'm going to read the very beginning of the book, which I hope is the thing that sort of sets the clock ticking. For the great sort of struggle between a singer and the demands of her voice.
Thank you so much.
Fab.
Thank you.
This is the prologue from Diva. Athens, February 1940. It had snowed the night before, and for once the 16-year-old Maria Kalagaropoulou felt grateful for the clumpy men's brogues that were the only shoes in Athens large enough for her size 9 feet. She hadn't seen snow since leaving New York 3 years ago. The night before, she'd been listening to the radio, and Milton, her sister's boyfriend, had turned to Maria and said, maybe she should think about going back to America. Everybody thinks the Italians are going to invade. You would be safer there. A year earlier, Maria would have been delighted at the idea of going back to the States and her father. But not now. She couldn't possibly leave her singing teacher, the wonderful Spanish soprano Elvira de Hidalgo. It usually took Maria 20 minutes to walk from the apartment on Pattison Street to the conservatoire. But today, the snow was slowing her down. As she turned the corner into Syntagma Square, she saw a familiar figure coming out of an apartment building. Madame, she cried, slipping and sliding on the snow as she tried to catch up with her teacher. Elvira de Hidalgo turned to smile at the eager face in front of her. Madame, I have mastered it. The trill. Standing in the middle of the road, Maria started to sing the trill from the mad scene in the middle of Lucia di Lammermoor, her voice so urgent and full of emotion that it shook the snow-muffled silence of the street. Elvira put up a hand to silence her. Maria stopped at once and looked mortified. Did I make a mistake? I was so sure I got it right this time. Elvira sighed. Oh, that is not why I stopped you, Maria. You should not be singing at the top of your voice in the street. Maria looked back at her in surprise. It had clearly not occurred to her that there was anything strange about her behaviour. Of all Elvira's pupils, Maria was always the first to arrive and the last to leave. Even if her own lesson had finished, she would sit through all of Elvira's classes, hoping to learn something. She wanted to be the best singer that Elvira had ever taught. But now she looked crestfallen. Oh, did I embarrass you? Elvira shook her head. Oh, no, my concern is for you, Maria. A voice like yours must be looked after. It is a precious gift. Don't waste it singing in the snow. Right now, you're young and you think your voice will always do everything you want. I used to think that too, but it won't be like that forever. The more you protect it now, the longer it will last. Elvira took the girl's arms as they walked along Pattison Street. You think you are invincible and I am making a stupid fuss. But I know what I'm talking about. You must have patience, Maria. Maria nodded obediently, but Elvira could see that she was not convinced, and she tried to think of a way to persuade her. A display in the window of an antique shop caught her eye. Imagine, Maria, an amphora like the ones in the Acropolis Museum, filled with those gold coins. She pointed at the tray in the shop window. Maria turned her head to look. That is your voice now. Every time you sing, you are giving away one of those coins. So spend them wisely, my dear, because once they are gone, there won't be any more. Maria looked so solemn that Elvira almost laughed. One day, I am sure you will be a great diva, one of the greatest sopranos the world has ever known, and you will think you are immortal. But when you are taking your curtain call at La Scala and the crowd is throwing roses at your feet, remember the coins, Maria. Hold on to your treasure for as long as you can. They walked along in silence for a minute, and then Elvira said, And you sang the trill quite brilliantly, by the way, light and dark at the same time, just the way it should be done. The solemn face of her pupil broke into a beaming smile. The conservatoire loomed in front of them. Elvira touched her pupil on the arm. All right, Maria, time for class.
That was Daisy Goodwin reading from her novel Diva, published by Head of Zeus. If you've enjoyed listening, we have a live event coming up on September the 9th at 7:30 at the Colony Room Green in London. Visit our website www.storyradio.org to find out more. Thanks for listening and goodbye.